Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you share with us, articles, research, your own notes, and really get stuck into it, looking for those key insights, maybe some surprising connections, and yeah, maybe even unlock a few mysteries.
Exactly. It's about trying to cut through the noise, find the signal, really, and help you get properly informed on topics that, matter to you. And today we're tackling something that is, well, it describes itself as intense, deeply symbolic, and definitely challenging.
Absolutely challenging. We are diving headfirst into a text called Liberi Liberi Vel Lapidis Lazuli sub Figura VII. I mean, just that title alone tells you we're not exactly wading in the shallows here.
Right from the start, the source material itself kind of gives us the setup. It says it's an A publication, and it's designated Class A.
Which signifies a pretty high level of mystical importance, doesn't it?
It does. It flags it as something foundational or profoundly revealed. The full title expands to Book of the Free, or of the Lapis Lazuli stone under Figure 7.
Okay, so straight away, we've got these core ideas. Freedom Liberi, the Lapis Lazuli stone, which is fascinating in itself, and this number, Figure 7. But it also tells us what it is, or claims to be. It describes itself as the voluntary emancipation of a certain exempt adept from his adeptship.
Which is quite a statement. An exempt adept is already a very high level of attainment in many esoteric systems. So this isn't about reaching adeptship. It's about someone who's already there choosing to leave it, to be emancipated from it. Voluntarily.
And it gets even more dramatic, right? It also says it contains the birth words of a master of the temple.
Exactly. So it's this dual thing happening. It positions the text not as like a history book or a philosophical argument, but as an account, maybe poetic, maybe experiential. It feels very immediate of this incredibly profound transition. Someone shedding one high state, the exempt adept, and simultaneously articulating the first words, the birth words, of an even higher state, master of the temple.
It's like a death and a birth happening at the same time at these really rarefied levels of, well, whatever this path is describing.
A shedding and a becoming. It sets an extraordinary stage, as you say.
And then the text kind of doubles down on how secret or esoteric it is. There's this introductory note saying that the full knowledge of the interpretation of this book is concealed from all, save only the sixfold star.
Yeah, so straight up it's saying, look, most people won't get the deepest meaning. It's not for public consumption, not easy to decode. There's a deliberate veil suggesting only those who've reached a very specific initiated state. That sixfold star probably refers to a particular group or level of consciousness within that order can really access the full meaning.
But then immediately after saying it's super concealed, there's this really striking instruction for the neophyte. That's basically the beginner, right?
An absolute beginner on the path, yes.
And the neophyte must nevertheless acquire a copy and thoroughly acquaint himself with the contents. He must commit one chapter to memory.
And that creates this amazing tension, doesn't it? The ultimate meaning is hidden, locked away, but the beginner is told, you have to get this. You have to get familiar with it. You have to memorize a piece of it.
So the value for the beginner can't be about intellectually understanding the hidden secrets, because the text just said they can't.
Exactly. It suggests it's more about immersion, engagement, internalization.
Yeah.
Memorizing a chapter that implies embedding the structure, the rhythm, the imagery, the whole feel of the text deep inside you.
Like the text itself is a tool, something to work on you, rather than just giving you information.
That's how it feels, experiential, like it's meant to shape the reader's inner world, maybe prepare them for things later on the path, even if they don't grasp the full interpretation yet.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, using the material you've shared, isn't to pretend we're part of the sixfold star or that we've got all the secrets.
Definitely not.
Instead, it's more like we're trying to navigate this really complex, sometimes pretty startling landscape from the perspective of someone doing what the neophyte is told to do, thoroughly acquainting ourselves with it. We want to unpack the rich imagery, the shifting perspectives, the intense states it talks about.
And try to grasp the shape of this journey being described, this emancipation, this birth, to help find some structure and meaning within it all for you, the listener.
Right. Exploring the terrain, the adept travels, trying to understand the language, the experiences, and see what insights we can maybe pull from this really radical account of the spiritual transformation.
Exactly. It's a journey into a very strange and potent inner world.
Okay, let's dive in. The text starts with a prologue, and it immediately sets this scene of, well, profound isolation. The voice begins, into my loneliness comes.
That initial state, that loneliness, feels really significant. It's like a starting point, maybe the end point of a previous path, this kind of ultimate solitude of the self.
But it doesn't last. It's immediately, almost violently broken.
Abruptly broken. The sound of a flute in dim groves that haunt the utmost hills. And then boom, and I behold Pan.
Pan. Wow. That's not exactly a gentle, welcoming committee, is it? Pan is the wild, the all-encompassing, sometimes terrifying force of nature, of instinct.
Primal. And the encounter isn't subtle, it's completely overwhelming. It invades every sense. On all sides, Pan to the eye, to the ear, the perfume of Pan pervading, the taste of him utterly filling my mouth.
It's total sensory immersion.
And more than just sensory, it goes deeper. The embrace of him intense on every center of pain and pleasure.
Ah, see, that's crucial, pain and pleasure. This isn't just bliss. The divine presence here includes everything, the joy, the ecstasy, and the suffering, the pain. They're like two sides of the same coin in this embrace.
Totally intertwined. The text even adds the sixth interior sense aflame with the inmost self of him, which suggests some kind of direct knowing beyond the physical senses, a direct grasp of the divine essence itself.
And the immediate result of this all-consuming divine hug is, well, it's startling.
Yeah.
The voice says, myself flung down the precipice of being even to the abyss. Annihilation.
Annihilation, yeah. That's not the usual outcome you expect when you meet God in most stories, is it? Not rising up, not being saved, but being thrown down into an abyss, into non-being.
And the text makes it clear this is the end of that initial state, an end to loneliness as to all. So the encounter with Pan directly leads to the destruction of the previous self, the lonely self.
And this is where we have to remember what the text called itself emancipation and birth words. Is this annihilation the necessary death of the exempt adept state?
The shedding part.
Maybe. Is the plunge into the abyss the kind of dissolution you need before the birth of the Master of the Temple can happen? It reframes annihilation. It's not just ending, it's violent, it's transformative, a required step for a totally new way of being.
And using Pan, this untamed wild force, as the catalyst for that, makes a strange kind of sense.
It feels fitting, yeah. And underlying all this, that primal call, Pan, Pan, Eo, Pan, Io, Pan. It echoes through the prologue in chapter 1. It's an invocation, a recognition, maybe a surrender to this specific wild divine power.
Okay, so then chapter 1 shifts focus slightly, but it keeps that intensity dialed way up. The divine presence is now called my God, and the relationship is declared with this incredible fervor.
Immense fervor. My God, how I love thee. With the vehement appetite of a beast, I hunt thee through the universe.
The vehement appetite of a beast. I mean, there's nothing passive or gentle about that devotion. It's active, it's consuming, like a primal hunger, driving it. That really sets the tone for the relationship described in the rest of the book, doesn't it? So dynamic, often paradoxical.
It's a huge contrast to, serene worship or quiet contemplation. The starting point is this fierce, almost predatory love right after that overwhelming, annihilating Pan experience. The adept is the hunter, chasing the divine beloved with a beast's hunger.
And this relationship, this hunt, it's anything but static. The divine, this my God, just refuses to stay in one shape, and the voice's relationship twists and turns just as wildly in response.
Yeah, that kaleidoscopic nature of the divine beloved is one of the most striking things about the text. It's not just variety, it's often straight-up contradiction. In chapter 1, God is a pinnacle, like a mountaintop, and the voice is a white bird landing on it.
Okay, sort of majestic.
But then immediately after, God is a nymph lying on the moss, and the voice is her lover.
A complete switch in scale and intimacy.
And then, just as fast, back to the wildness, God is Pan again, then a centaur, then suddenly harder than tempered steel, there's no diamond beside thee. The divine is fluid, nature spirit, wild beast man, impenetrable gemstone.
And the voice's actions mirror that instability, that fluidity, after asking, didn't I yield everything? The declaration is visceral, shocking even. I woo thee with a dagger drawn across my throat. Let the spout of blood quench thy bloodthirst, O my God.
Wow. So love is expressed through self-sacrifice, but in a really graphic, violent way.
Then, bam, another reversal. God is now a little white rabbit in the burrow night, and the voice says, I am greater than the fox in the hole. Now God is small, vulnerable, prey even, and the voice is the powerful hunter again.
This constant, sometimes really jarring, flipping between forms and roles is just relentless. God is a great hooded sun, then the cold emptiness of heaven. In chapter 2, God is described as a little pet tortoise.
A pet tortoise, that sounds almost demeaning.
It seems weak, confined, right? But at the same time, this tortoise is somehow sustaining the world elephant. So weak and cosmic sustainer simultaneously. And the voice can be tiny, small enough to creep under the tortoise's shell or sit in its heart.
But then later the voice becomes gargantuan, huge, making galaxies look small.
The forms just keep multiplying through the chapters. God is a beautiful Nubian slave, a goat's horn, marble pan, an Athenian courtesan.
That's chapter 2. Then in chapter 3, God is a purple plum.
A purple plum, then a cluster of maidens, a multitude of swans, a shining god caught in nets, that's chapter 4, a beautiful boy, also for 5, a tiny little red worm, 4 again, a shining fish.
It's dizzying. Chapter 5 has a strange scarlet bird, a little white goat with lightning in his horns.
And then later, a sparrow god, a deceiver, the beautiful bull of Apis, the beautiful serpent of Apep, the beautiful child of the pregnant goddess in chapter 7. It's an endless parade.
And the voices' role, their relationship, shifts just as much. Hunting beast, perching bird, lover to a nymph, violent wooer with a dagger, spearing God like a fish.
Supplicant radiating light, sometimes becoming that above, then feeling tiny under the tortoise shell, sitting inside the heart, getting drunk, walking in an asylum, loving God, even surrounded by the insane.
Desiring dark kisses, feeling immense compared to galaxies, being a maiden bathing a wounded bird, being devoured by God, racing through eternity.
Catching God like a hawk, offering itself as bait, sometimes as a splendid naked woman, sometimes as a violent, beautiful man.
Swimming like a trout, being played with like a boy's toy, mating with that scarlet bird, becoming a tiny grain of gold dust in the stars, an instrument tuned to God's rapture.
And then feeling apart, a speck in the stardust, but also the master of the secret of things, the captain bearing the cup of the Most High, always seeking union, but ending by spilling love outwards.
So, what does all this mean? This relentless shape-shifting, these often contradictory forms for both God and the adept's relationship, it doesn't feel like a steady path towards one fixed idea of God.
I think maybe the dynamic state is the path. The text isn't giving us one description of God or one way to relate. It's showing the divine as, well, fundamentally protean, capable of appearing in infinite forms, often contradictory ones, embodying every possible archetype, every experience.
And the adept, in this process of emancipation and birth,
has to become just as fluid, able to embody all these ways of relating hunter, hunted, lover, victim, worshiper, weapon, instrument, and able to see the divine in every disguise, from the infinitely small worm to the cosmic sustainer, from the beautiful boy to the ancient sorrow. Maybe this constant flux is the dissolution of the old, fixed identity of the exempt adept. It has to break down.
And woven through this whole intense, shifting dance is that constant presence of pain and pleasure, often tangled together. We saw it right back in the prologue, the divine embrace on every center of pain and pleasure.
Exactly. It's consistent. Chapter 1 talks about a cry of pain crystallized, offering blood to quench divine bloodthirst, being smitten with the reek of thy mouth.
Not exactly pleasant imagery.
No. And being told, thou wilt inflict the punishment of pleasure, that phrase appears in chapter 1 and again in 3. Pleasure itself is framed as a punishment, or perhaps just overwhelmingly intense. This isn't a path that tries to avoid suffering. It seems to weave it right into the fabric of the divine encounter.
The voice feels sorely crushed and torn by galaxies in chapter 2, desires dark kisses, bloody and stinking, also in chapter 2. Life itself, when it's full of this divine presence, is described as being too full. It pains, it slays, it suffices. Pain isn't an obstacle, it's just part of this overwhelming fullness.
And the soul bites into itself like a scorpion ringed with fire, chapter 3, aches for God even in the pain, chapter 3, and asks God to crush me in the winepress of thy love. My blood shall stain thy fiery feet, chapter 3. There's even mention of torment unspeakable when suing a pale God in that same chapter.
Even the delicious God has a smile sinister, chapter 3. It's constantly there.
There's the imagery of piercing God with a spear, chapter 4, being devoured by God's teeth, chapter 5. The whole encounter being like a blizzard of fire, chapter 4.
So this constant mixing, this interweaving of pain and pleasure, violence and tenderness, torment and rapture, it really reinforces the idea that the transformation isn't about getting to a state of pure bliss instead of suffering.
Right. It feels more like integrating and maybe transcending that whole duality. The divine embrace, the deepest connection, seems to contain the totality of experience, including the really extreme and uncomfortable parts. Maybe the emancipation of the exempt adept is partly about being freed from just seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. Maybe the master of the temple state involves being able to exist fully and find the divine within both.
The text definitely suggests this turbulent dance of extremes is fundamental to the whole birth process. It's not an unfortunate side effect, it's part of the engine.
Exactly. And this intense paradoxical journey unfolds within this incredibly dense and diverse symbolic universe, pulling from all sorts of mythological and esoteric traditions.
Yeah, the range is huge. The text is like a tapestry woven from symbols from all over the place. We see figures from Greek myth, Pan, obviously, but also Bacchus, Uranus, Eros, Marisis, Olympus.
And a really strong, prominent thread of Egyptian deities and ideas. Amun-Ra, Isis, Osiris, Horus, Typhon, Hathor, Apis, Apep, the Bennu bird, the lotus of Isis.
Plus, you get hints of Gnostic or mystery traditions, like figures named Iao and Iacchus, references to druids, Mexican caciques, and a weird winged god, Roman emperors and notorious figures like Pertinax, Messalina, Locusta, Caligula, Caesar, Greek courtesans.
Even a Saxon white horse pops up. The sheer eclecticism is really striking.
What's fascinating isn't just that they're all there, but how they interact, sometimes even like clash with each other within the text.
That's a great point. Remember the priest of Amun-Ra in chapter 3? He's furious when Bacchus barges into his temple. But by the end of that passage, Bacchus becomes the priest, and the original priest is now following Bacchus's wild crowd.
So it's not presenting some neat, harmonious blend where all traditions just merge peacefully. It's showing this dynamic, disruptive, almost violent overthrow and reintegration of these symbolic systems.
Yeah, the clashing eclecticism seems to suggest the text is operating at a level deeper than any single historical religion or mythology. It's using these different symbolic languages as pointers, maybe to universal archetypal forces or states of being.
And showing how these forces manifest and interact inside the adept's consciousness during this radical transformation. It suggests the emancipation might be freedom from the limits of any single fixed symbolic system. You have to be able to navigate them all, see the divine force behind them all.
Beyond the gods and myths, the text is just saturated with other powerful symbols. Lapis lazuli, for instance, is right there in the title, and in chapter 3 it mentions the lapis lazuli of the king's bedchamber being stained with blood.
Lapis lazuli, that stone, has so many associations. Wisdom, truth, royalty, the heavens because of its blue color. In alchemy, it's sometimes linked to the philosopher's stone, right? Representing transformation or perfection.
It is. So staining the stone a symbol of high truth or perfection with blood, which is a symbol of life, sacrifice, passion, pain. That's incredibly potent imagery. It connects the idea of ultimate truth directly to the intense, bloody, messy process the text describes. The perfected stone isn't clean, it's marked by the journey.
And that alchemical flavor continues with all the metals and minerals mentioned. Gold pops up everywhere, chapters 1 through 7, silver 5, diamond 1, ruby 3, marble shows up quite a bit, 2, 3, 6, 7, onyx, opal, sardonyx, malachite, all in 3.
These represent different states, different values, different kinds of resistance or malleability, gold versus diamond, cold marble versus fiery ruby or shifting opal. It really evokes that alchemical idea of breaking down, combining, refining substances to get to a perfected state.
Mirroring the adept's journey of dissolving and transforming. The recurring marble images marble Pan, a marble statue that gives birth to the voice, another statue shaken by a crowned child that suggests something seemingly inert, cold, fixed, can still be filled with divine life or affected by these birth pangs.
And the liquids and substances mentioned carry huge symbolic weight, often linked to sacrifice, intoxication, nourishment, life force itself. Blood, 1, 3, 4 few, wine, 2, 3, 6, 7, liquor, 2, 6, oil, 1, 7, honey, 4, 7, spice, V6, 7, dew, built 4.
Blood is used everywhere, quenching divine thirst, staining feet, writing runes. It's the ultimate life force sacrifice. Wine and liquor point to intoxication, losing boundaries, entering altered states, maybe secret sacraments.
Oil for anointing, sacred acts. Honey for sweetness, divine food. Myrrh for sacred rites, or maybe even embalming, linking to death and transformation. Dew and milk feel like symbols of divine nourishment or grace descending. These aren't just descriptions, they feel like active parts of the ritual landscape of the text, things that cause transformation or enable the encounter.
Then there's the constant play between light and dark, above and below. Stars 1, 4, V's the sun, dawn 6, moonlight 4, even a blizzard of fire 4.
Contrasted with darkness, night 1, 4, 6, 7, the abyss, the below.
And the adept falls into the abyss, is revealed by darkness, and seeks an anarchy of solitude and darkness at the very end. The journey isn't just climbing towards the light. It involves plumbing the depths, engaging with shadow, dissolving into darkness.
Silence also crops up as a significant state, or maybe a goal, distinct from all the voices and cries. Work be accomplished in silence, still, solidity of the silence, silence of things. It suggests maybe a state of being or knowing that's beyond language, where the true nature of reality, things, is just apprehended in stillness.
And all these encounters and transformations happen within or involve certain structures and objects that feel deeply symbolic. A citadel, a trident 1, an arbor or trellis 4, great book 4, a pyramid 4, altars 3.
A wicked thing that becomes a cornerstone that's fascinating, a crystal shell or oyster yielding a pearl, an inverted palace leading down to a heart of blood, temples 3, a chattel, the Holy Grail, cloistral cells like a honeycomb, an imperial dais or circus.
A sigil and specific tools or symbols of power at the end. Sword, mitre, winged wand, globe, Benny bird, lotus. These aren't just stage sets. The citadel is besieged, the trident is a weapon, the temple is taken over, the altars demand sacrifice.
That wicked thing becoming the cornerstone that suggests something seen as base or negative is actually foundational to the new reality being built. The crystal Aleister pearl is classic symbolism for finding a hidden, precious core. The inverted palace leading to the heart of blood below, that's potent, turning hierarchy upside down, finding the vital essence in the depths, maybe the subconscious.
And those final tools in Chapter 7, sword, mitre, wand, globe, bird, lotus, they're all traditional symbols of magical or spiritual power, authority, attainment. It suggests the adept has somehow gathered or integrated all these capacities by the end of the journey.
And then there's that subtitle again, Adumbration of the Kabbalah of the Egyptians. Now, the text doesn't explicitly lay out the Kabbalistic tree of life or explain Sephiroth in detail.
No, it's not a textbook.
Not at all, but it uses numbers quite prominently. Figure 7th in the title, 7 chapters, 7 words or sentences mentioned. The 6-fold star holding the hidden knowledge. The 11-fold God, 418, 8 cries. And it talks about abstract principles like the one, the not, the abyss.
Which definitely resonate with Kabbalistic ideas like Ein Sof, Kether, the abyss of death, maybe.
Exactly. So adumbration feels like the right word. It's not a direct explanation, but it's shadowing, hinting at, maybe structured according to an underlying esoteric system, perhaps a blend of Kabbalistic principles with Egyptian mysticism or gnosis.
Which suggests that even though the imagery feels chaotic and intensely poetic, it might not be random. There could be an inner logic, a path defined by this hidden framework, giving context to the whole journey of dissolution and rebirth.
For an audience familiar with these systems, it hints that while the text is deeply experiential, there might be a structural key implied by Figure 7 and the adumbration. That number 418, for example, is hugely significant in Thelema, often linked to Abrahadabra, the word of the eon, representing the great work or the manifestation of divine will. It grounds the 11-fold God within a specific symbolic system.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit now to the adept's internal experience. The source material paints a really vivid, if sometimes jarring picture of the states of being they seem to move through.
Yeah, this is where the text becomes almost like a deep dive into consciousness itself, or altered states of it. We start with that initial loneliness, prologue, also mentioned in 3rd and 7, which gets blown apart by the divine encounter and annihilation.
But then a sense of being alone or apart actually comes back later, maybe as a desired state, suggesting it's not the same negative isolation as before, but a transformed kind of solitude.
Possibly. And then there's this really significant engagement with madness. In Chapter 2, the voice walks in an asylum, surrounded by the insane, but then cries out, "Oh, madness, madness, madness! Desirable art thou."
Desirable, not just acknowledging it, but wanting it.
Exactly. It suggests that madness here isn't just mental illness. It's maybe a metaphor for breaking free from the constraints of normal, rational thought, maybe a necessary state to perceive the divine in these extreme ways, or to undergo this radical kind of transformation.
So it's seen not as something to be cured, but maybe a state to be embraced for its liberating potential. Though maybe still dangerous, it mentions the fear of having no check.
Right, it's volatile. And linked to that, maybe, is the theme of drunkenness, tied to all the imagery of wine and liquor. I was pernicious drunk, CH2. The soul is drinking, CH2. Even God gets drunken upon my kisses.
So that intoxication, literal or symbolic, is another way of dissolving normal boundaries. Letting go of the mundane self to have this direct, uninhibited experience of the divine. Becoming full of cupbearers with divine wine, as it says in Chapter 6.
And the constant swinging between pain and torment, mentioned in my 3-7, and states of rapture and bliss, I2, V6, these don't feel like just mood swings. They feel like distinct states of being that the adept has to not just pass through, but maybe fully inhabit.
Yeah, the text doesn't seem interested in eliminating suffering. It portrays it as integral, part of the divine embrace, maybe even something to be sought out. Remember the torment unspeakable serving the pale god in chapter 3. Rapture, on the other hand, is the state of the soul, CHV, the result of being that divine instrument. The path seems to demand integrating these extremes.
Annihilation and dissolution come up again and again. Prologue 4v7. It's the result of meeting Pan, falling down the abyss, becoming like starry grains of gold dust, dissolving into fire and water.
Which really hammers home that idea that the journey involves the complete destruction of the previous self, the exempt adept identity. It's not just polishing the old self, it's dissolving it entirely to make way for the birth of something new.
And then there's silence. Work be accomplished in silence. Still, solidity of the silence of things, that feels like a state beyond language, beyond thought, where maybe the ultimate reality, things, is just known directly. It's the opposite of the voice, the cries, the word.
And then there's that complex idea of solitude and being apart. Alone, lonely, but also away unto an anarchy of solitude and darkness. And finally, silent, unique, apart. References in 2, 3, 4, 7.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because the text is also so much about union with God. So the ultimate state seems to involve both profound union and this radical inner solitude, being unique and separate within the all.
So it's not the initial loneliness of isolation, but a transformed solitude achieved through the whole process of dissolution and union.
Maybe. Perhaps that's the freedom within the anarchy of solitude. And the text is explicit about shedding past identities, like remembering being a priest of Amun-Ra, CH3, or a cacique in Mexico, CHV. These are presented as roles left behind.
Reinforcing that the journey means leaving behind old roles, histories, even previous spiritual achievements. The exempt adept has to be emancipated not just from limitations, but from the identity of adeptship itself.
So if you connect all these intense states, loneliness turning into solitude, the embrace of madness, drunkenness, the pain rapture spectrum, annihilation, silence back to the description of voluntary emancipation and birth words.
It looks like the text is mapping out the experience of this radical transformation.
Yes. It suggests emancipation isn't gentle, it's violent, it's turbulent, involving full-on engagement with and maybe dissolution through these extreme states of consciousness and experience. They aren't obstacles to overcome, they are the process of birth.
Which brings us right back to that instruction for the neophyte. He must commit one chapter to memory. What does that tell us about how you're supposed to approach this text?
I think this is absolutely key. If the journey involves navigating or embodying these states, then memorizing a chapter packed with this kind of imagery and intensity is like internalizing the pattern of that experience.
So the text isn't just a description to be understood with your brain.
Exactly. It's a pattern to be absorbed, maybe a tool to evoke or prepare your own consciousness for these kinds of states. Remember what it says in chapter 6. It is not enough to hear the bird. To enjoy song, he must be the bird.
You have to become it.
Maybe the memorization is part of the process of becoming the bird, internalizing the song so it becomes part of you, not just something you hear from outside.
So it's not study about the path. It's actually meant to be a component of the path itself.
That's how it reads. The text itself is the ritual, the meditation, the work. It demands participation.
Okay, let's dig into the search for meaning within the text now, especially this idea of the word and the different ways it describes the ultimate goal, the end.
The word definitely appears as this really significant but also quite elusive concept. In chapter 4, there's a great book containing the phrase verbum fit verbum.
Word becomes word.
Right, which suggests the word isn't static, it's a dynamic process, a becoming. And it's followed by a cry in an unknown tongue, emphasizing that it's beyond ordinary language. It's like a fundamental truth or reality that's in the process of manifesting or realizing itself.
Then later in chapter 7, the word is revealed by the burning of the incense and the distant drug, linking it to ritual, maybe altered states again, and the voice declares, "Thou art the Word, O my darling, my Lord, my Master." So here, the divine beloved is the Word. It gets personalized.
But then it gets more specific, linked to number. Ours is the 11-fold reading of the 11-fold word. And later the voice says they're seeking a word for myself, nay, for myself.
So there are layers here. There's a supreme divine word, maybe the 11-fold word, connected to that 11-fold God, 418, but also the idea of a personal word, a unique truth or identity that the adept realizes for themselves.
That 11-fold structure again points towards a specific esoteric framework, grounding this ultimate reality in a numerical significance, even if the reading itself is hidden.
The text also talks about a wrong at the beginning, in chapters 4 and V. Chapter 4 is really explicit. The sacrifices are done to atone for the wrong of the beginning, yea, for the wrong of the beginning.
Yeah, that introduces this idea that there was some kind of original flaw or error right at the start of things, or at least the start of the current state. And the whole transformative journey, including all the painful, sacrificial parts, is framed as an attempt to fix or atone for that fundamental wrong. It gives the whole process a kind of cosmic purpose beyond just personal growth.
So what is the end that this whole journey is aiming for? The text gives us multiple descriptions, and they don't always seem to line up easily. It starts with annihilation in the prologue.
Chapter I mentions the flame expiring in NOx, which in systems like Thelema often represents that state of absolute potentiality or nothingness before creation. So the end there is dissolving back into a primal void.
Chapters 2 and 4 just state simply, there shall be an end, or all is done, marking a sense of completion.
But Chapter 4 also talks about falling down the abyss of years, which sounds less like a triumphant end and more like getting lost in time.
Right, but paradoxically, that fall is linked to hearing the call of eternity, the overworld, and the world of the Word. So maybe the fall isn't into oblivion, but into a different dimension of reality, a deeper layer of time where the true Word resides.
It's complex. Chapter 5 talks about dissolution, again echoed in Chapter 7. All shall dissolve. And specifically dissolution in the ocean of love, CHV, and the ultimate end is called the abyss of glory, CH7, another great paradox combining dissolution and divine radiance.
Then Chapter 7 seems to pull several possible endpoints together, almost presenting them as simultaneous aspects of the final state. Achieving an anarchy of solitude and darkness, entering into union with the many, simply enjoying love, actively spilling love, breeding mighty children, and being silent, unique, apart.
And this is where the paradoxes really stack up, isn't it? How can you be in an anarchy of solitude and darkness and, at the same time, in union with the many? How are you silent, unique, apart, while also spilling love outwards and breeding children?
It really challenges our usual ways of thinking about these things.
It suggests the end isn't a simple single state, but this complex, multifaceted way of being that just transcends conventional dualities. The anarchy of solitude and darkness, maybe that's the absolute inner freedom found in the deepest reality, beyond constraints of light or society. And union with the many is becoming one with everything. Maybe they aren't opposites in this state, but different dimensions of the same ultimate freedom and realization.
And what about that instruction back in Chapter 5? That passive love is the only key to unlock the secretest chamber, the sealed vault. How does that fit with the vehement appetite of a beast, the violent wooing, the active hunting kind of love we saw earlier?
That adds another crucial layer, doesn't it? Maybe the journey involves moving through all those intense, active, even violent forms of love. But the final step, accessing the deepest mystery, requires a completely different quality of love.
Like a shifting gear.
Maybe. A love that's purely receptive, allowing just being, not striving or effort, but radical openness, radical acceptance. And that state is what opens the final door. It suggests the adept has to master multiple, even contradictory ways of engaging with the divine.
The final verses of Chapter 7 give us a glimpse of this culminating state. There's that powerful image, the sigil of the vast black ocean swallowing lesser darkness. There's the admission of the ultimate unanswerable question, what is, which neither the voice nor God can answer. The simple command to enjoy. And that state of being silent, unique, apart.
It reinforces that theme of radical acceptance and the limits of knowing. The ultimate reality is this consuming darkness that contains everything. The deepest truth leads to a question that dissolves answers. And the state of attainment involves inherent joy in this profound inner solitude.
But it doesn't stop there, does it?
Yeah.
The very end describes this outward explosion. Love bursts over the bonds of space and time. It spills among them that love not love. Wine is poured for those who never tasted it.
In that line, the vigor of my love shall breed mighty children from their maidens, described as happening without draft, without embrace.
Which is a very striking image.
It's a vital insight into the nature of this master's emancipation, this birth. It's not just about personal union or achieving some static state of bliss for oneself. The process culminates in a state where love isn't just received or held, it spontaneously, vigorously, creatively overflows out into the world.
And this creative power seems inherent to the master's being. Figure of my love, bypassing normal physical means, without draft, without embrace.
And it flows out even to those who seem furthest from love, them that love not love. It suggests the master state is one of active, transformative influence on the world, stemming directly from their radical freedom and their paradoxical nature. The birth words aren't just about being born, they're about birthing new realities, maybe new consciousness in others, through the sheer force of this transformed love.
Okay, let's try and bring these threads together. Looking back at the whole journey, what does that title, Liberi Vel Lapidis Lazuli sub Figura VII, really seem to signify? Liber Liberi, Book of the Free.
That clearly connects to the voluntary emancipation, maybe that anarchy of solitude and darkness, freedom from the old state, freedom from limitations, maybe even freedom within the ultimate reality or radical freedom.
And Lapidis Lazuli, the lapis lazuli stone, representing the transformation itself, the precious hard-won reality achieved, stained by the blood and experience of the journey. Or maybe that paradox of the divine being both hard like diamond and fluid like a nymph.
I think potentially all of that. It feels like a symbol of the substance of the work, the stone of being that gets refined through the alchemical fire of the journey. It's capable of holding both the divine light and the consuming darkness, and it's marked, stained by the process itself.
And sub Figura VII, under Figure 7, obviously points to the 7 chapters, maybe those 7 words or sentences mentioned, but also suggests a hidden structure.
Almost certainly. Figures VII strongly suggests an underlying esoteric structure based on the number 7. Could relate to the 7 lower Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic tree, maybe 7 stages of the process. Combined with the adumbration of the Kabbalah of the Egyptians, it heavily implies that despite the wild, poetic, seemingly chaotic flow, the text is actually following a kind of conceptual map.
Shadowing or tracing a path experientially, like you said, rather than explaining it intellectually.
Exactly. It's hinting at how these intense states and symbolic encounters fit into a defined path of spiritual development within a particular esoteric system.
So, the text itself, it's intensely poetic, deeply personal, packed with symbols, possibly encoded, deep secrets in these songs. Not enough to hear the bird, to enjoy a song he must be the bird. How should someone approach material like this, especially remembering that neophyte instruction to memorize, to become the bird?
Well, that instruction is fascinating because it makes it clear that just understanding it with your intellect isn't enough. It's insufficient. The text seems designed to be internalized, maybe even lived. Memorizing a chapter isn't just about rote learning. It feels like it's about embedding the patterns of consciousness, the symbolic sequences, into your own being.
Like letting the text work on you from the inside.
Yes, using it as a tool for your own transformation, not just reading a description of someone else's. It demands participation, active engagement, allowing the language and the states described to resonate within your own psyche, maybe opening up the possibility of experiencing something akin to this journey yourself.
It's initiatory, even for the beginner. So bringing this back to you, the listener. Okay, Liber Liberi is undeniably esoteric, uses very specific, often obscure language. But does the core of the experience it describes, does that resonate with more universal human journeys? You know, intense emotion, grappling with paradox, the search for freedom or meaning, the desire to transcend limits, the often painful process of shedding old parts of ourselves, encountering something vast and overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. I think the underlying human experience is the loneliness, the shock of encountering the unknown or the divine, the intense mix of pain and rapture and deep connection, the struggle for freedom, the terror and liberation of the self-dissolving, the paradoxical nature of reality. These are universal themes.
Even if the specific gods or symbols aren't familiar.
Even then, the raw emotional and psychological terrain the text maps out that speaks to fundamental aspects of the human condition, the perennial quest for transcendence, for a deeper reality. It's like a radical, perhaps extreme map of the inner territory that many people explore in different ways.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Liber Liberi Vel Lapidis Lazuli, it's clear this text is far from a simple instruction manual. It's a powerful, turbulent, intensely personal account of a spiritual emancipation and rebirth.
It takes the adept and the reader trying to follow along through this bewildering universe of shifting divine forms across a symbolic landscape rich with diverse, sometimes clashing traditions, and demands navigating these extreme states of being: annihilation, rapture, madness, profound solitude.
It really challenges our standard ideas about God, about spiritual relationships, about what progress on a path might even look like. It shows a way that's anything but linear, anything but comfortable.
And it suggests that true freedom, true mastery, involves embracing paradox head-on, dissolving the old self utterly, and culminating not just in some quiet internal union, but in this radical, creative, almost explosive outpouring of love back into the world.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over, drawing from this incredible source material. The text suggests that the journey to freedom involves embracing extremes, navigating paradox, transforming through intensity, even through pain and annihilation. And it ends not just with personal attainment, but with a spontaneous outpouring of creative love that breeds mighty children without physical contact. What does it truly mean in the context of such a brutal, beautiful journey to achieve an anarchy of solitude and darkness? And how can that state, being silent, unique, apart, simultaneously result in this vigorous, overflowing creation fueled by love? What does this deeply complex, paradoxical text ultimately suggest about the nature of real freedom?
Something to definitely ponder on.
Thank you for joining us for this journey into the challenging depths of Liber Liberi. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.